It's March 7th, 2018. I'm John DeLynn. I'm here with Brooke Bonham Miller and Josh Miller. We're here talking about their faith crisis, how it led to severe stress in their marriage, how it led to Brooke not wanting to live anymore, and how, as a way of processing their crisis, they went to speak with Dr. Spencer Fluhman of the Maxwell Institute, and we've covered most of their time with Spencer. We've got a little bit more to cover, and Brooke, we kind of cut you off. So can we jump back to you and have you share what you were sharing? Anything else you want to say to wrap up?
So I was just saying, if this information that we're disclosing is detrimental to Spencer Fluhman's career in any way, shape, or form, if they decide that they want to cut him off, I think that is them sending. I mean, I was saying how only 0.001% of the world is LDS. So if you're trying to strengthen your numbers in the church, this is going to go directly against that. It's not going, you're sending a message here and putting a bad taste in the mouth of people like me and people that don't know much about the church. People that find out about stuff like this, it's going to deter them away from the church in my mindset. It's not going to do the church any favors.
Yeah, I think the old apologetics of, you're wrong, search, ponder, and pray aren't going to hold up. I mean, as the younger generation continues to grow throughout the church, you're going to have voices like Spencer's for a reason. And I think that he's the best avenue for that. And I think a lot of people that went through faith transitions or even are questioning or early on in the process and can meet with someone like Spencer, it may give them a different perspective. Because otherwise you're faced with black and white facts, right? Facts that happen in history, problems with the doctrine in the church, that there are no answers for. And so I just hope that, again, in our sharing these things, our understanding, and always has been, that this shouldn't be a shock to anyone that knows Spencer or the way he teaches. He openly teaches these things in all of his meetings, his lessons, and even in his local ward and stake. So I don't think these things are shocking. Our hope was to take some of what we learned and give it to a broader audience.
Let me read some of the comments that we have. Spencer writes, "It seems to me that mentioning Spencer's name is a good thing because it adds credibility to hear that a prominent voice in the LDS community validates concerns that so many have. It allows people to finally be honest with themselves that having doubts is perfectly normal and okay." Jerry Lee writes, "Brooke Miller, you said we okayed this with Spencer. Are you saying he gave you permission? Can you please clarify whether Spencer actually gave permission, or did you just make him aware that you were going public on this? I do think there's a big difference."
So when we talked to him, we let him know specifically that we were going on Mormon Stories Podcast. We invited him to come with us, and he declined. He never expressed anything against going on it. So if that's what you're asking, he never came out and said, "No, I don't want you to go on there. Please don't go on there."
I guess she's wondering if you asked his permission to come on Mormon Stories and to talk about what we talked about.
I don't know if I needed his permission, to be honest. It's my transition story, and I would like to tell it as it is. So, I mean, do I need his permission?
I think in the tone was from Spencer was, "Brooke, Josh, I wish you guys the best. Really enjoyed meeting with you. I would love to meet with you again. And, you guys share your story how you guys see fit. It's just Mormon Stories isn't a forum that, makes sense for me, and I think that I can certainly respect that position. So to your point, I don't think it was ever implied or felt like we needed to ask permission.
I think Spencer's a very communicative person. So I think that if he had a problem with us going on there, he would have said, "Please do not go on there." He never said that.
He did give some constraints, though.
Yeah.
As far as sharing the recording.
So what were those?
Yeah, he asked that we made this clear too. He asked that we not share it to the broad audience, the recording.
Share what?
The recording.
The audio recording.
Mm-hmm.
And the transcript.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So we didn't.
Right.
Yeah. So we just took some notes and brought our notes on to what we wanted to Yeah, what we took from it.
So his explicit request was what? You do not have my permission to what?
Share the recording or transcript.
Yep.
Okay. Did he ever say, please don't talk about what we talked about?
No.
Okay. I don't know if that satisfies Shirley, but she says, thanks for clarifying, as your previous comment did make it sound like Spencer had given permission, but this clarifies that he was made aware, but did not give any kind of approval.
I don't know that you would expect him to come out and say, yeah, go for it. I mean, I don't know what she's looking for, but
looks like she's looking for approval.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, it's my transition story, and Spencer was in that. So for me, he was part of my transition story, but it's not like I brought his transcript on here or his recording on here. So
what about the idea that, and I've had people share this with me, they've likened it to a therapist. When you go to a therapist, there's an expectation of privacy. He expected that, what if someone were to say he expected that his meeting with you was private, and therefore to share whatever was discussed in a meeting that he expected to be private, is not staying in spirit.
Well, let me put it this way. I would say that some of the podcasts that helped me the most were the ones where they met with general authorities, because because I'm going to my bishop for a year. I'm looking for guidance from someone with authority in the church. Here are my questions, help me. And I constantly got search, ponder, and pray. So I thought, let's go to someone that's met with the general authority, an apostle, someone. Tom Phillips really spoke to me because he met with Jeffrey R. Holland, knew Jeffrey R. Holland personally. Okay, well, what's Jeffrey R. Holland saying about these issues? He's got to know, right? And so the point of that, and our point in this conversation and sharing this was, here's another individual that's in high regard in the church. He's an historian. He's well educated, and here's his point of view. And again, I guess I can understand the concern if these were things where he's like, Josh, Brooke, please don't share these because, these aren't well-known facts about me, or I don't share these opinions openly. It was, Josh, Brooke, I'll be dead honest on every single topic. Everyone knows where I stand on these. I'm open. Everyone in my, I get weird looks in my word because some of the stuff I talk about, but it wasn't like he doesn't share these things openly. So I don't know if the perception is that he was sharing these things in hopes that they would never get out, because that never came across in any form. Because
he says, I wrote him an email too. I was kind of engaged at one point, and he said everything that I've shared with them, I've been sharing in congregations. That I've been sharing in my BYU for 20 years. The difference is, and someone else raised this earlier, we're representing what he said.
Exactly.
So it's not fair because we could be misrepresenting. What do you guys say about that?
Well, I totally agree.
We could be misrepresenting what
that's
he
what I'm saying.
Said.
I totally agree with that, and that's why we invited him, and we really pleaded that he would come, because we wouldn't do justice of what he said, and it is our interpretation of what he said.
John, you did say to him, you specifically said, in us not airing the recording or the transcript, that it can misconstrue things. And he was okay with that, and he was aware of that.
Yeah. I mean, he's in a position where he just can't come on Mormon Stories or he gets fired.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So,
and I understand his stance, but this is the thing. It comes to a place where we can make a difference.
You know what we should do? Spencer Fluhman, Dan Witherspoon, whoever, go on whatever forum you feel comfortable to respond, to share, to give your story, whatever forum you feel comfortable, and then we'll share it on Mormon Stories. But go on a forum you feel comfortable.
Yeah. I hope that we try to do justice by what we felt he was coming across. And again, our point is, dude, Spencer's out of his mind. That we never said that once. I think that Spencer's really intelligent. I think he's come up with a really insightful way of dealing with these issues, and I think it's totally plausible to subscribe to that and stay in the church and live a happy life.
We're coming here to bash him. We're coming here to paint him in a good light.
Okay. Some of the audience is saying move on.
Totally.
And let's go ahead and finish out recapping the interview. Then we'll talk about. But we appreciate everyone who's given their perspectives. It's super useful, and it's a tough thing. Yeah. Like Dan basically said, do you realize you're in murky ethical territory? Do you have a quick response to Dan?
I would want to ask him why he's upset and why he feels that way. Because if anything, we felt like we tried to be as ethical as we can. We could have not even notified Spencer of this, right? We could have released the recording. We didn't do any of those things. We tried to run everything by him to make sure all parties were.
We even invited him on here with us, and we
Right.
still wish he was here.
Right.
Okay. So let's talk. So the LGBT stuff. What do you guys want to say about his responses regarding LGBT stuff? Because Brooke, you brought up suicides.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you guys brought up people that are suffering. How did he respond based on your memory?
Basically, he was just he responded as if he talks to people from LGBT communities every day. How his heart goes out to them, and how he basically it's on us. He said, "This
Meaning
is
what?
basically like this is a problem that the church has that we have not addressed, and that it's something we're working with, and it's a problem. It's a well-known problem to this day, and we're just not there yet. And we're hoping we'll get there and we can come to a conclusion, but we're just not."
How about you, Josh? What do you remember?
I remember him just having you mentioned humility a couple times, a real humble stance and sense of love for those people that suffer with that. It came across as very genuine, and that he wants to be an avenue and a source for them, a place of comfort to help them deal with anything they're dealing with. And that, he feels that there's a place for them, that we love everyone, and that the door should never be closed. And so that was the sense that I got from him.
And can I just include in that, that's the God we know. When we left the church, that's the God we came to know. The God that we once knew in the church was a God of unconditional love, no tolerance whatsoever. And I think the God that we've come to know since we've left the church is one who understands people regardless of their circumstances and gives them the benefit of the doubt, because life is hard. And choices to be true to yourself, that's true bravery. And it's like, it's hard. It was not easy for me and Josh to make the decision to be here today, to put all this information out there about us and disclose all this. I mean, it's not easy doing this, but the thing is, we've been there. We know how bad it hurts. And we want to be a voice for the people that are going through a hard time. And for us, Spencer's approach is a very refreshing approach to us, because it's one that I feel like comes from a loving tone from a God that we know, not the God we used to know.
Yeah. My notes from the conversation, he went back to saying that God has intentionally made this all murky so that the LGBT problem is a result of the murkiness of the process that God put in place for Revelation to be murky in a struggle. So in that sense, I was he wasn't blaming God, but for me, that's the implications of teaching that the process is intentionally murky. It's that, it's a bummer, but tens of thousands of LGBT people are going to kill themselves, but it's murky. You know what I mean? But that wasn't his tone. He wasn't intentionally laying it on God, but he started by saying the revelatory process is murky. This is a result of the murkiness. He went back to this idea that we need to readjust our perceptions of what prophets and apostles are, implying very clearly that which he had stated previously, which is that prophets and apostles make mistakes, sometimes all the time, sometimes they're 30 years behind the times. So he was clearly saying that this is likely a failing of our prophets and apostles and of us.
Then why can't I be a prophet, or Josh be a prophet?
Well, that's a super legitimate question. I mean,
right.
That is the question. How plain and precious is it if we're all prophets, but we're all really not?
Yeah.
He also talked about we need to mourn with them, mourn with those who mourn. We need to run to them. We need to embrace them, which was really beautiful. He said he didn't believe that the brethren intended to cause this pain and alienation. And he called it a failing. So he characterized our LGBT approach a failing for the church. Am I getting that wrong?
No,
you guys can
you're completely
corroborate.
right. Yeah.
So, and he basically said we need to have charity for the apostles and prophets if we expect them to have charity for us. So it's sort of like...
But I don't feel charity coming our way.
But I
Say that again.
I don't feel charity coming our way. I feel like it's...
More towards the LGBT people for that matter.
No, there's they say, what did Joseph Smith say, D&C 31, chapter 131, like the least degree of sin, no acceptance of the least degree
Least degree of allowance.
Yeah.
The Lord has no tolerance.
Yeah,
for...
and I feel like, that's kind of where they stand on everything. It's just no. And it's, I think when you have that perspective, and you don't, and I mean, Spencer obviously doesn't have this perspective, but when you have that perspective as a person with children or as a parent, and there's no give, there's going to be a breaking point with your child where, your child is not going to, they're going to be true to themselves, and they're going to live a life that makes sense to them. And we want that for them, right? We want our children to live their life to the fullest and to be able to answer questions and be true to themselves. And just as we are children of God, we should have that allowance as well. But as far as a prophet and apostles are concerned, they want to choose our guidelines for us. They want to choose our values for us. We don't have that wiggle room to choose for ourselves. It's the least degree of allowance there.
What were you going to say, Josh?
No, I was going to say that his tone was around prophets, which I tend to agree with, is that we typically, maybe whether the church teaches us or we just culturally teach it, is that prophets are perfect, that they speak the word of God. And Spencer's is like, no, prophets aren't perfect. None of the prophets in the Bible were perfect. But
he would say the DNC tells us they tell us themselves they're not supposed to be perfect.
Right.
So why are we holding them to this standard?
Right. I think that's because we've been taught that our whole life, right? And I also think it stems from Brigham Young, right? Like, and maybe again, whether this comes from the pulpit or not, it's generally accepted that if a prophet says something, it's the word of God, and you have to do it. Period. Right? And God and the prophet would never lead you astray. But yet,
and don't forget the primary song, "Follow the prophet,
follow the prophet,
follow the prophet,
but,
follow the prophet,
right?
Don't go astray, follow the prophet." Right?
Right.
Yep.
I mean, is it any more clear?
Yeah, and and that interpretation is, well, you kind of look at these guys like they're just getting inspiration as they go along, And my analogy to that is, I'm like, well, then Steve Jobs was pretty inspired, right? He created a multi-billion-dollar business in Apple. So you could relate it to anybody that runs a corporation, right? They're smart guys. They make common sense decisions. Like the whole, last revelation was to lower the age for missionaries from 19 to 18. Well, that's just common business sense, that you're losing missionaries and you have enough missionaries out, and you're losing missionaries between the ages of 18 and 19. So you lower the age. I don't see any prophetic nature in that. For me, it would be much more profound if they were ahead of the curve on civil rights movement and ahead of the curve on the LGBTQ issues.
And the women's rights movement.
And the women's rights movement, absolutely.
And the Me Too movement.
Absolutely. And it's crazy to me, too, that I didn't realize it until I got out of the church and started learning some of this stuff about women's rights and things. I'm like, so if you think about it, and, my mom, Brooke, my sister-in-laws, I'm like, so if you live a great life and you attain celestial glory, what you have to look forward to is being a sister wife. Right? Like, to me, that's crazy.
And if that's heaven, I don't want it. Sorry.
What do you mean?
Like,
you don't want what?
I don't want to be one. I don't want to share my husband with multiple wives. I don't want to.
Yeah.
I mean, like, if heaven to me is not sharing my husband with multiple wives, heaven to me is not living some perfect life as to where I can't enjoy it, or I can't be true to myself, or, I mean, that just, the heaven that Mormonism creates does not sound like heaven to me, especially because when I go to church, I don't feel like I relate to majority of the people there. And I feel like it's a very judgmental world. And that doesn't sound like heaven to me.
That's
personally.
another component that I think Mormonism in general is going to have to face, because the world is evolving. And, I have 2 daughters that are amazing, and I want them to grow up in an environment where they have equal opportunity, and it's not, a male-dominated environment. And the church is very much an old narrative of male domination. It's priesthood power. It's the heaven is geared towards men having multiple wives. It's just this view I don't agree with anymore, and that took place once I could step out of the church and, break down the barriers and the walls that have been put up through my upbringing.
All right. So sort of towards the end of the interview, he sort of focuses on this section around nuance. He basically says that naturalistic explanations are inadequate to sort of really characterize the fullness of what he experiences, that he finds profundity and brokenness and nuance and complexity and imperfection and messiness, struggles. He sees it as more profound, not less. And this is something Dan Witherspoon often emphasizes, that you can like have this binary worldview, the church is true or false. We're all kind of set up for that. And we're fools when we think it's all true. But what Dan would say is you're fools for thinking that it's all false. And that what if there's something deeper, which is this richness and profundity, this value in the struggle, that it makes us wiser, it makes us deeper. And clearly Spencer is wise and loving, right? And Spencer's sort of making this case that there's more to life than history, more to life than naturalistic explanations, more to the gospel than this hard stuff, that there's truth behind it, the community, the spirituality, what you read when you read the Book of Mormon and you get inspired, the experiences. And just to be clear, there was 0 sense I got that he didn't genuinely believe in the church.
Oh, yeah.
That he didn't genuinely believe that the scriptures were inspired. He believes this church is of God. He believes
Absolutely.
the scriptures are inspired. He said that he feels like this is the best church he knows of with the best answers. So he even sees the church as exceptional in that way. But he's saying, just like you, Brooke, or you, Josh, can't be summed up by your neurons or your atoms. There's something more special about you. There's a deeper and a richer engagement that you can have with Mormonism, taking off the table whether it's true or not, taking off the table its truthfulness and just focusing on its goodness and its richness and its spirituality. So he did make that case that he can't deny the spiritual experiences that he's had. He can't deny the spiritual experiences he's had reading the Book of Mormon. That in some ways he said he's captured, but in a profound way. So he said it's a choice. He's made a choice to stay with the church. But he also used the term captured, but not captured like a victim, captured like I've had so many incredible, rich spiritual experiences that I can't deny it. And did that in any way give you guys pause where you're like, well, you said you've had those spiritual experiences. You love the church. You found value in it. What were you thinking when he's saying, hey guys, stay with the deeper, richer struggle here. Don't abandon that just because you were set up with a false dichotomy of true or false. What would you say?
Well, first of all, I love that response. That was one of the best things he said, I thought, the whole time. And you're right, he was a defender of the faith all the way through. He just did it in a different way. He did it in his own approach. But I agree with that. That just does not align with the narrative that there's one true church. Because you can find spirituality in Buddhism and Judaism and Hinduism and any religion out there. You can find a sense of spirituality.
And he would say, well, then bring those.
Right.
And just bring those into Mormonism.
And I feel like
Mormonism is big enough to include all that.
Yeah, and so for me...
So why abandon Mormonism?
Yeah, because the church teaches there's one true church. And for me, if it was a case where you were, again, where I grew up around so many different religions, if you were Baptist, there was not a Baptist guy saying, dude, if you're Presbyterian, you're going to hell, right? Or you're not going to attain the best glory. Mormons say that if you don't go through the temple ordinances and you don't believe as we believe, then you're not going to make it to the celestial kingdom. And that, I believe, contradicts that spirit of, let's bring everyone. This is a big heaven. Let's have everyone in it.
And it goes back to a loving God too.
Yeah.
But then again, and I don't mean to argue with you,
Sure.
but people would say, no, you forgot. Joseph, that's one of the beauties of Joseph's theology. He's got the spirit prison. Spencer even said, I've got no hell in Mormonism, right? He said that in the interview.
Right.
That there's a spirit prison, that everyone's going to get a chance to hear the gospel. And that's what's so awesome about Mormonism. It's so inclusive to the point where Buddhists and Muslims and Jews and atheists can make it the celestial kingdom. That's why we have ordinance for the dead.
Then why have missionaries? Like, why?
Because it's
why
the
is
most
it big,
true.
right?
Because it's the most
But
true.
Sure, but
To
I'm
us,
saying
it's
if everyone's
not.
going to learn in
What?
the afterlife,
To us, it's not.
What do you mean? What's not?
For us, it's not the most true. I mean, you look at, to our defense, I went through our interview, and I wrote notes on all of our questions. I tried to find answers to all of our questions throughout the interview. And like going back to the DNA, the only legitimate answer that I felt like was good enough for me was, well, just because we haven't found DNA does not mean it's not there. That was the best answer that I had received throughout the whole interview. And the thing is like, if I'm really searching for answers here, but I got a lot of I don't knows and I wish I knew kind of answers. I never really got any legitimate answers. It was all kind of just pulling here and pulling there and a collaboration of things and I don't knows. And I mean, Spencer knows his stuff. And he's a smart guy and I'm not going against his credibility at all. But to be honest, when we walked away from the interview, I came into that interview with very high hopes. Upon leaving that interview, I was really sad. I walked away and the whole next day, I was really disappointed. And I remember the next night I was coming home, or I was going to hang out with my friends, and it was in Salt Lake, and I was driving there, and I literally bawled all the way there.
Why?
Because I had not received any answers. I had so much high hopes that I was going to receive answers to my questions, and none of them were there. And so for me, it was just like, I was hoping that Spencer, somebody who had studied anti-Mormon history, who had a dissertation written on it, somebody who knew their stuff, could answer some of my questions. And yet, upon leaving, when nothing could have been answered, I had to refocus. I had to resituate my thoughts after my emotional mental breakdown. And I had to think, what was the best thing I could take away from this? And it was the optimistic nature of the interview that I brought from it that helped pull me through.
What's that?
It was, that Spencer said pretty much, yes, we haven't found answers, but...
Was that validating?
It was,
Was
yes.
there something positive?
Oh.
Was there something positive about the validation that there are no good answers?
And John, this is another thing that was so validating. We had gone through so much prior to meeting with Spencer and the falling out of the church. And I mean, I'd been judging my husband, and I'd been throwing accusations his way, or people have been throwing accusations his way. And sure enough, I felt so guilty about that. And I realized how judgmental I'd been, and the guilt and the shame and the heartache. And of course, coming into the interview, I was just thinking that that Spencer could provide that clarity for me. And I was angry and I was mad and I was bitter. But when Spencer kind of painted everything in a different light, gave me a different perspective. Yes, we don't have these answers, but, and yes, there are problems with the church, but they need to be changed, and we're hoping that they'll be changed, and we're fighting for change. And I mean, he has a very optimistic and bright outlook, and I admire that about him.
Josh, what were you disappointed, not disappointed? What were your reactions to Spencer's, time with you after you were done?
I would say I was pleasantly surprised by his approach. It didn't change my opinion of where I stood, but but I appreciated his tone. I appreciated, and we've talked about this a dozen times, but I appreciated who he is and how he's made sense of things in a very intelligent way, and I respect that. And I think that we need more Spencer Fluhmans out there for people that are struggling, for people that are in mixed faith marriages, because he offers a place for both sides. He even mentioned in his to us that he has lots of friends that have found their way outside of the church, and they're happy in that. And he's still friends with them. He's friends of everyone, and I think, his point is, I'm here to help however I can. I want, obviously, you to be here in the church. I believe this is a richer place, and you're going to find that you can have a very fulfilling life in the church. And he has, right? He has with his family, his friends, his ward. He believes in the organizational structure of the church, and so I took away from that. Okay, for me, if the church came out and said, okay, Joseph Smith was a good person, or you could say that he had some revelations or spiritual influences that we would like to live by, but he didn't translate a Book of Mormon. He never found plates. Let's be honest. He never, all this stuff was made up, right? Then I could absolutely go to church every Sunday and be part of that community and be part of the family. I appreciate the family. I appreciate service projects. I appreciate everything that the church stood for. I just can't go there and then come back to my son and be like, yeah, Joseph Smith spoke with God, because I don't believe that, in my opinion. And so that Spencer's approach didn't answer those questions for me, but it gave me a point of view where I can respect people that choose to stay. And I think that's what came out of the meeting was, instead of being on one side where you're negative and you hate the church and you hate everything it stands for, Spencer offered a vision into people who choose to stay and why they choose to stay. And I really respect that.
And John, going back to your question, I don't think I fully answered it. Did I feel validated? Yes, I did. Because going through our transition, you talk to so many people that are skeptical of you and skeptical of your intentions, and I don't think they have an accurate reading of you. And so of course you're thinking, by the time this girl approached me to meet with Spencer, I was almost done with the church. I just was like, I can't find any answers anywhere. But then she brought up this opportunity, and I thought, of course, I would give the church any chance that I possibly could, because that's how much I want it to be true. And not only that, I want to consider the fact that anybody who's skeptical of my decision or chooses to judge me for my decision, I would hope that they realize that I gave everything I got to find truth. So we went to Spencer and finding truth, and to prove that no, there are not answers to our questions. And when I walked out, yes, it was hard, but to a huge degree, it was a huge sense of relief, because we felt validated walking out that door. Wouldn't you say, hon?
Absolutely.
So why did you cry all the way home that one car ride? What was that crying about?
Because I was really hoping we could find answers. I mean, going into the interview, I'm thinking, gosh, there's part of me that's dreaming about watching my son go on a mission, and my daughter gets married in a year, my daughter's going to get baptized in a year, and I'm thinking that's a possibility. We just might come out, in high hopes of knowing that these things can happen again, and I can have a testimony, and I can revive my story. I can go back to church, and we can live this happy, because really if you think about the gospel, it's just too good to be true. All of it is just, it's like kind of like a fairy tale in my mind. and we can live this fairy tale. So that's what I was thinking. And then, of course, we didn't get the answers we were searching for. I didn't feel like we got any legitimate answers to our questions. So I left and I was disappointed and my head was hung low, and we kind of I don't know, so, the next day when I had time to myself, as a mom, and I think many moms out there could relate to me, you get time in your car to yourself, and that's time to think and time to be alone. And that's my thinking time. And as I'm driving to meet up with my friends, I'm just in tears, and I'm realizing, my high hopes were shot down once more. And I guess what's next? Where do we go from here? Because, you talk to a lot of people. There's people in my family that said, well, if you leave the church, how do you raise your kids? And I even had a discussion with somebody I'm really dear to, and they said, what's going to happen to your kids if you leave the church? And I said, I don't know. They'll get into football. They'll get into basketball. They'll get into art. I said, if your kids don't go to church, they're going to get into drugs and alcohol, and they're going to be alcoholics.
Which is super weird because Utah has like a massive prescription drug abuse problem, and there are STDs that are rampant, and pornography, by some reports lead the nation. So the idea that only healthy, happy kids come out of Mormon families is crazy, given that we have double to triple suicide rates of our youth compared to other states. That's another thing we just need to totally stop, is this idea that only Mormons raise happy, healthy kids.
Right, totally. Yep.
And then consider the fact that, the Mormon population is 0.001% of the world. So there are a lot of good people out there.
Yeah.
They're not Mormon. Yeah.
So one last time, I'm just going to say, why not the idea that, yes, the church isn't true. Maybe it's not better than any other church, but it's your tribe. And in it, you could pursue spirituality. You could do all this outside. Let's just agree to that. You can serve outside Mormonism. You can sing hymns and pray and believe in Jesus or not. You can have community. Let's just say you can do all that outside of Mormonism. Why not stay anyway? Because you'll have an influence. The structure's there. It's your tribe. And it's a great place to serve. It's a great place to, the scriptures can have value, even if they're not true. They can still have spiritual value. And there's truth in the things taught. Why not follow Spencer and Dan's sort of urging to pursue rich, deep spirituality within Mormonism, even if it's not what it claims to be?
Well, I think we're all navigating this process on our own, and we're all trying to find our truth, and we need to have integrity and be true to ourselves in the process. But
so, what does your integrity tell you?
Well, this is what I had to do lots of research, because this is not easy. You're uprooting your children's lives. You've taught them a certain way their whole life, and now you're choosing to completely uproot their teachings and steer them a totally different way.
So don't do it.
No, for me, I couldn't do it.
What?
Because back.
I'm saying don't leave. Stay then. If it's so hard.
Going back to your podcast with Mike Norton, I know it was a very controversial podcast. It was a great podcast at that, very entertaining. But you asked him a question, and this question just sat with me, and I couldn't shake it. And the question was, is there more good or is there more bad in the church? And, I think as an insider, you don't want to see the bad, so you're not going to look for it. So you're not going to be exposed to the bad. But for me, I had to dig, and I had to find out for myself what I thought. And for me, there's more cons than pros to staying in the church. So
what are some of those cons for you?
So for me, the cons are, you look at the social pressures within the church, like the moms that have to outdo the moms, or the callings that have to outdo the callings. Those are the social pressures that come with it. You look at the people that are, here in Utah, antidepressant meds and anxiety meds are at their highest. There's more prescription meds here in Utah than there is anywhere in all the states. So there's the wedge that it creates in the relationships of families, changes that people make in their life. I mean, to fit the mold of, like, for instance, Josh, I mean, he could have gotten his full ride and played football, but instead he decided to go on a mission. And now, I mean, he kind of has regrets in a sense. He wasn't able to live his life true to itself. And people will literally drop everything, get married, have kids. It's like this lifestyle that they lead. So be if that's what makes you happy. But that's also in my pros list too, because me and Josh wouldn't be here if we didn't have that. So I added that to the pros list as well. LGBTQ community, here we come again. Single parents or children that go without to afford high-rise buildings, shopping malls, lavish materials for temples, all these things that, I mean, Josh's mom is a perfect example of that, where she, and there's so many moms out there where they pay their tithing, yet they can barely afford to get food on the table for their children. Yet, why do we need these high-rise buildings? Why do we need these shopping malls? Kids are starving. People are going without so that they can have the highest quality materials imported from Italy for their curtains, for their temples, and nice and the best artists to come in and paint on their walls. Like, I mean, they're beautiful and they're great and we appreciate the artwork, but why do we have to go through these extremes and have people that are going without, and people are struggling just so that we can have these, nice little luxuries. Then also there's how people are raised and then in turn frowned. For instance, the Lance and Nikki Miles, how he was raised, and his dad was gay, and once his dad came out, he in turn was taught to frown upon his dad. So, the perspective of how people frown on people in the church. Unrealistic expectations that create guilt or shame. 1% of the tithes donated to generous causes. Only 1% of LDS Church tithes are donated to other causes in the world. Paid apostles and prophets. The secrecy kept from its members in turn to make people look like us look bad. The Sam Young petition. Suppression to reach outside ourselves and live blindly. And last, the lies upon lies upon lies.
All right, that's quite a list. Josh, why not stay?
Yeah, for me, fundamentally, if you even put the historical issues aside, I don't believe that there's one true church, and I don't believe that lesbians and gays are going to hell. And fundamentally, that just does not sit well with me. And the church has made very clear where they sit on those two issues. And so for me, I feel like I can get anything I need out of spirituality through service, through community, through fellowship outside of the church. And that's why I choose to live outside of it.
All right. Well, this has been so wonderful. We have so many comments, way too many comments to read, but I'll just read a few. Sherry says, "Thank you, Brooke and Josh. I relate and wish the integrity of our search could be validated by loved ones without hurting them." Christy writes, "Integrity matters." So lots of people are saying, thank you so much for your courage. And I just want to join with all of them and say thank you so much for your courage. I also want to say, just because Dan and Jerry Lee are friends, that they did write in later, and you can go back and find their comments where they basically just say, yes, we've been challenging the ethics of what you've done. out of love for Spencer and a desire for good to keep continuing within the church. But Dan and Jerry Lee have both expressed sincere pain at what you've experienced and support and validation. So that's because I love Jerry Lee and Dan. I'm going to make sure not leave them hanging that way. We've had a very high number of participants here, and people are just really grateful for your willingness to share a really hard experience.
And I would just say that we're here, if somebody wants to reach out to us on a one-on-one and they're going through similar issues, it saved our marriage. Mormon Stories saved our marriage. People like Spencer saved our marriage. And so we're eternally grateful to the people before us. So if we can be of any source of help, we would be happy to do it.
And communication is key. I think that communicating with your spouse, communicating with your family, your loved ones, friends, whatever you can do to get through it. So,
final words you want to share with Spencer, if he's listening?
Spencer, thank you for your opportunity, or for the opportunity to meet with you. Thank you for your insight, for bringing us to a brighter light. We love you. We appreciate you. We think the world of you, and we praise you in your ability and desire to do good for others.
Yeah, Brooke said it well. I mean, Spencer, the short term that we've known you and everyone knows you, your integrity, your search for honest truth, spoke volumes to us. So we appreciate everything you're doing for us and for those that are struggling.
All right. Thanks to everyone who's joined us live for this interview. Thanks to everyone who supports the Open Stories Foundation and Mormon Stories Podcast. Your donations make all this possible. If you love this type of content, if you value it, if you value its reach and its impact, please do donate. 10 or 20 or 50 or $100 a month keeps this nonprofit alive. We're transparent in our finances. We have a staff that the money goes to. We have accountants, and we do everything we can to make sure that we are promoting awareness of difficult issues. But most importantly, the mission of the Open Stories Foundation is to support people in transition. So if you want less divorces, less suicides, less mental health issues, more support, more awareness, less splitting up of families, please support Mormon Stories and the Open Stories Foundation financially. In addition to financially, there are other ways to support us. You can like our Mormon Stories Podcast Facebook page. You can make a positive review on the Mormon Stories Podcast page. We have mean-spirited people all the time give us 1-star reviews when they don't even listen to the podcast, just to bring our rating down. So we always need each week a new round of people giving us positive interviews. iTunes interviews are really important, so please go to iTunes and give us a positive, favorable review on iTunes. That helps us get the word out. That's really important. And then follow us on Instagram and Twitter as well at Mormon Stories. And finally, please know that we do hold most weeks or months workshops or retreats to support people in faith crisis. We've got some coming up, so please go to mormonstories.org/events. We may even do one in South Jordan. Is that right?
Yep.
So if any of you are in South Jordan, Harriman, West Jordan, Sandy, Draper, wherever that may be, we're going to be holding workshops or retreats soon. We also may do some. We've had interest in Sacramento. We've had interest in Portland. We've had interest in Minnesota, Chicago, Milwaukee area, Orlando, Florida, DC. We've had people coming out of the woodworks, even Ogden, Layton area. We've had people coming out of the works wanting us to do workshops and retreats to save families, to save lives, to help with mental health, etc. So if you want to be a part of it, reach out to us and let us know that you want to bring one of our workshops or retreats to your area. We just did one in Phoenix that was life-changing for the 60-plus people who came. We did one in St. George a few weeks ago. Again, 5-star reviews. So we're grateful to Amy Grubbs, Cody Layton, the Open Stories Foundation Board, Sharon Price, and all those who make the Open Stories Foundation possible. And just again to conclude, we love you guys and good luck blazing a new trail.
Yeah.
I want to just give you hope that you can raise amazing children in or out of Mormonism. You can have a healthy marriage in or out of Mormonism. You can find community in or out of Mormonism. You can find spirituality and health in or out of Mormonism.
Are you saying there's hope for us?
There's not only hope, there's this beautiful, wonderful, thriving life ahead of you. You're seeking truth, you're seeking authenticity, and it's going to pay huge positive dividends for you. I bet. That's my bet.
Yes. Well, thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah.
All right.
And yeah, thanks for having us and letting us come on here, and we appreciate it.
All right. Thanks, guys. Thanks, everyone, for joining us. Please tune in again soon for more episodes of Mormon Stories Podcast. Take care, everybody.